Welcome to Solutions OP Clinical Trials Podcast. My name is Olga and I'm the Managing Director of Solutions OP. We are a small team of experienced professionals working on clinical trials in the United Kingdom. I'll use our podcast to discuss hot topics in clinical trials and provide analysis of the latest trends and challenges in pharma and medical device industries, not just in the UK but globally. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the latest episode in our podcast. Today we will talk about, are placebo clinical trials ethical? In this episode we will talk about a little bit of what is a placebo exactly, why do we use placebo in clinical trials, and also what are the ethical issues of using placebo in clinical trials, and what do we do to prevent unethical use of placebo in research. So I think it will be a very good topic and interesting topic, and you can learn a lot. So first of all, what is a placebo? Generally, placebo is considered as an inactive substance. Often it's called a sugar pill or a sham procedure if you're talking about medical devices perspective. So when is acceptable to use placebo? This is the big question. And actually the only option to use placebo is as part of clinical trials. So otherwise we don't use placebo. If you think about it, probably makes sense. So in terms of clinical trials, we can have different type of designs, including placebo. So, for example, you can have a placebo arm, an active drug arm, or you can have a standard of care plus placebo and standard of care plus active drug. You can also have active medical device and a sham arm. You know, when you're not using the device, or just use the switched off machine and so on, depends on the type of device that you have. So you can have really different designs of clinical trials using placebo. So let's go to the question, so why do we use placebo in clinical trials? So basically the placebo in clinical trials is analog to the control group in scientific experiment, because clinical trials are investigating drugs and devices which are not approved on the market. Of course, you're trying to obtain as much as possible information to make a decision if that device or if that drug is actually working for this particular medical condition. So in a way, it is a scientific experiment. You can classify it as such. So placebo clinical trials became popular after the Second World War, when it was demonstrated that the best clinical evidence produced by a placebo-controlled randomized clinical trial. Why, you're probably thinking, so why placebo-controlled randomized clinical trials? Well, one of the obvious reasons is because it's a way of reducing bias. So if you don't know who is taking a drug and who is not taking the drug, and if you have active drug and placebo which look exactly the same, it's more likely that the physicians will not be influenced in their assessment of the outcome of the drug, and also patients will not be influenced, in their assessments of adverse events and different other, important endpoints of the study. So this is a really great way to avoid bias in clinical research. It's interesting that they have observed that some patients respond really well to placebo. So, for example, in the literature it says that about 35% of patients on placebo have reported effectiveness. And this is particularly true about clinical trials using pain medications, hypertension, asthma, and even myocarditis, which is quite strange. But they have reported apparently some positive effects. But today we're not going to discuss the placebo effect in treatment. So, as a result of that, many basically the clinical trials using placebo are considered as a gold standard in research, and they're required by many regulatory agencies. So, when you see a placebo-controlled clinical trial, there are many things that you need to take into consideration. First, if there is any treatment for this condition. If there is no treatment, many agencies expect to see placebo controlled trial. And as I said, it's considered as a gold standard. Although there is a difference between the agencies. For example, the FDA in the United States generally is not keen on approving placebo clinical trials in America. They find them unethical. But on the other hand, they want to see results from placebo-controlled clinical trials. The situation in China, for example, is completely different. In China, if there is no approved treatment for this medical condition that you want to test your drug, you need to use placebo. It's like mandatory. It's not something that you can avoid. So they have a different view on the usage of placebo, and we'll discuss this in a moment when we talk about the ethical issues of using placebo in clinical trials. So it's also important to mention when it's acceptable to use placebo. So the only time when you can use placebo is when there is no other effective treatment. So if you have other drug or device or any other therapy which is approved for the specific medical condition, you cannot use placebo. You have to use what is approved and used for these patients as a standard of care. Basically, it's unethical to use placebo if you have any treatment options which are approved for the condition. So what are the ethical issues? Let's go to that question now. So there are two arguments. There is one argument against placebo and there is one argument for placebo. So the argument against placebo is basically medical ethics. No patient should suffer from unnecessary pain. This is quite well known. From the medical ethics perspective. And also, the obligation for every physician to provide optimal medical care for their patient. So from that point of view, you can understand why many physicians may not feel comfortable using placebo clinical trials. But on the other hand, we have the other argument, which is for placebo clinical trials. And basically, if there is no effective treatment and alternative therapy that is not shown to work with this specific condition, can you actually offer to patients some random treatment? Because if you have nothing approved and you don't want to use placebo, what do you use? I mean, you use something which is not approved. You don't know if it's effective. You risk additional adverse events and even worsening the condition of the patient because you don't know if what you're giving them as an alternative, if that actually will help them at all or if that will actually make them worse. So you need to think about this perspective as well, not just the ethical part of using placebo, but also if you're not using placebo, what other options do you have as a control group for medical condition where you don't have any treatment? So these are the two main ethical issues against and for placebo. And if you think about that, you can see reason behind both of them. Another thing that we need to discuss when we talk about placebo clinical trials is how do we prevent unethical use of placebo in clinical research? And this is important because this is something that kind of help understand the ethical issues and probably give you a bit more perspective. So, for example, if you're using a placebo in a clinical trial, it needs to be justified. So you need to have a risk-benefit analysis and make sure that you're not withholding any standard of care for these patients. Also, if you have placebo and you're considering using it for vulnerable groups, for example, children or people with mental health issues or oncology patients, you need to have a proper analysis and really good justification for using placebo, and also what happens if something goes wrong. For example, if you have a blinded studies, very often you need to have some kind of rescue treatment for patients. Another thing that we take into consideration in terms of placebo clinical trials is the design of these trials. So there are different types of designs. Very often you'll see that less patients are on the placebo and more patients are on the active drug. For example, you can say have like 75% of the patients treated with active drug and the rest are on placebo, which basically minimize the exposure to placebo. Another option is if you have to do one-to-one, like 50% of patients active drug, 50% on placebo, you can have a shorter treatment for patients on placebo, and then you can switch them to something else. So that's another option, so that you reduce the placebo treatment for these patients. And of course, you need to have some early escape mechanism, which is basically a regular check to make sure that patients are doing well, no one's worsening. And if you see someone worsening, you can switch them to some other treatment and prevent them from getting worse from that point on. And this is particularly, if you have a blinded clinical trial when you have patients on placebo, of course, you need to have some kind of unblinded data review where a team of physicians will look into the data and make sure patients are doing well on the study, and they'll know who is on placebo and who is on active drug. So there are plenty of options when you use a placebo, how to control that patients don't get harm from this. And again, I think one very important point, although I'll mention it at the end, but it's actually one of the most important bits, to clearly explain in the patient information sheet that you're using placebo. Tell patients about the risks, tell them about any rescue treatment, especially if you have a blinded clinical trial. You have very often some rescue treatment if something goes wrong that could be used. So it is important that patients understand and they're able to make their own decision if they want to participate or not. Because at the end of the day, it's research. It's not something mandatory. They might change their mind. So to me, the most important part is that we inform people and give them as much as possible information so that they can make the best decision for themselves. You think, well, why would anyone consider placebo clinical trial? Well, the reality is, what I've seen from my practice in the past, sometimes you have patients with chronic conditions, which are long-term chronic conditions. There's no treatment for them. They know what the outcome will be, and yet some of them are very keen to make a difference to the life of other patients, and they participate in these clinical trials just to make their own contribution to studying more about the disease, or to studying more a new potential treatment for that medical condition, even if they don't think they'll necessarily have any, major change to their own outcome, especially with some terminal conditions. So for many patients, as I said, well, of course, many patients look for some alternative and treatment for their condition, but there are many patients also who participate in research just because they want to make a difference for someone's life and contribute to research and help others. So I think this is why it is important that we inform them and we make sure that they understand that the study has placebo and what are the potential risks and benefits of it. So what I can say in conclusion is, no one likes placebo clinical trials, believe me. I've worked for so many years, and I haven't seen a single pharma company say, oh, hooray, let's do one placebo clinical trial. I've never seen that. They all are very reluctant to use placebo, but sometimes because it's a regulatory requirement, they have no options and no choice. If there's no other treatment, they kind of have to use placebo. There's no other alternative. So as I said, of course, no one likes that. Everyone wants to give to the patients any treatment or anything that could help them, of course. But it's inevitable that we need to use placebo in some clinical trials, and this is for the sake of the better understanding of the drug and for getting enough clinical evidence, so that will help, for this drug to reach the market at some point, and many more people will benefit from it. So, of course, there are negatives and there are positives of using placebo. It's not a simple solution, and it's not easy to decide. But as I said, often it's a regulatory requirement, and there are not many other options for the companies to consider any other alternative. Thank you for listening. I hope that was an interesting topic, and I'll be with you in another episode. Thank you very much.